I am Neil Edwards, and this is the Leadership Range, where we elevate the voices of Black and Brown coaches, leaders, and allies, and have soulful conversations about all things at the intersections of leadership, relationships and teams, well-being, and inclusion. Here I offer deep insights and practical tips for work and life. I had an insightful conversation with Dr. Towanna Burrous earlier this month. She's an amazing Black woman leader who's filling a gap in professional coaching around diversity. I love what she is bringing to the profession. But more than that, though, her life as a leader has been and still is incredibly intentional. Her way of being is remarkable and is a great example for others to emulate. Take a listen. You'll hear themes like Unifier, disruptor, family, community, birther, and a little bit about a woman whose shoes were too loud.
Dr. Towanna Burrous, welcome. It's such a delight to have you on the Leadership Range today. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I'm excited and I'm really delighted to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Neil, for having me. I'm looking forward to spending this time with you.
Dr. Towanna Burrous, she is the president of and founder of CoachDiversity Institute based in Washington, D.C., and an executive coach. And just about everybody wants to work with her because of her wisdom and brilliance. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about herself professionally, and then we're going to get into it today. So, Towanna, why don't you let folks know who you are?
Thank you, Neil. So as the president of CoachDiversity Institute, my mission is to train change agents in the skill of coaching. So I use the word train in the space of because it's a new skill, but it's truly an education, a learning journey that I like to say. And so I have been given the honor and the purpose to attract some of the most amazing professionals who have decided that the coaching skill is something that they want to add to their resume or what they offer. And so being the founder of this has been a journey in itself, recognizing what's happening in the world. But yeah, CoachDiversity had to this point, as we are talking today, we are almost 6 years old, and we're celebrating almost 600 students who come through our community of coaches and learned from us in one of our training programs, and it's been amazing. So yeah, that's what we do, and that's who I am.
Yeah, I'm, when I found out about, CoachDiversity Institute, I was delighted. And I think I've watched it for the last maybe 3 or 4 years. And I know things have probably changed a lot over those 3 to 4 years. And certainly over the last year, just so much energy around the Institute and a lot of enrollments. I know that your programs are stacked full all the time. And I love what you're saying about a learning journey. I'm a coach, trained a few times over, and coaches are lifetime learners, and coaches are on a lifetime learning journey. And I know for me, although I am already a trained coach, I hope that one day you'll see me sitting in the seat, maybe in front of you or in front of one of your instructors, learning again, because there's always more to grow and learn. So thank you for that in this, Women's History Month. Yesterday is International Women's Day. Thank you for doing what you do. And I'm delighted to have you here again. There's something else I wanted to say about CoachDiversity Institute, and it escapes my mind. I'll come back to it. But I feel there's a little bit of a celebrity giddiness I have. I'll admit that right now, because you're a CEO and founder of an amazing program, and I just so appreciate you for doing it.
Thank you.
So what I do with my guests that come on with me, I want to invite you to share with listeners more about yourself, sort of the learning journey of your life and how your leadership has developed over time. From whatever point you choose, but I'd love it if you would start at a very young age, a youthful age, perhaps, and that could be prior to university or during university, And just take us through a few inflection points that have influenced you and sort of brought you into the leader that you are today. Tell us about your learning journey.
Neil, when you said how far back, right? So while you were describing this next segment, I was thinking every time you said that, I took a skip like 10 years and kept going, right? So where I landed when you said that, I landed in middle school. I was in 7th grade, and my math teacher, who I've spoken about in different varying ways. This math teacher saw this disruptive, very unhappy girl in his class. And I had come from out of the inner cities of DC. We've journeyed through several communities where Black community was strong, right? Lots of representation. Went down to the southern parts of the suburbs where it became less diverse. And so I never really embraced the fact that my community lacked diversity. And so I was really still very disrupted as a child. This 7th grade math teacher, who happened to be a white male, he called me on my stuff, if I should say it directly, right? He would say to me in class, Towanna, you're not paying attention. Towanna, you're not doing your best. Towanna, it was constant, right? And I just got sick of him. I got so sick of hearing him call my name that I would want to skip class all the time. Till one day, I guess he had enough, and so had I, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I had to stay after school. He was determined to punish me in some way. So I had to stay after school because it was, algebra. I didn't really care. I mean, I didn't say that I wasn't, of course I was smart. I knew I could apply myself, but he decided to hold me back. And so this 7th grade math teacher, who I will never forget, sat me down one-on-one and told me to my face that I was a leader and that the other students were following my lead in his class. And that he felt that if I would embrace math, that the others would embrace math. He also told me if I changed my attitude about my position in that school, that others would come along. And he wasn't specific about who. He didn't say other Black kids. He just said generally across the board. Was I a popular kid? Yes. I knew I was popular, but not in the corny way. You know what I mean? It was like I knew I was probably popular for the wrong reasons because I was disruptive. so he wanted to have order in his class. And so it was a win-win. I'm going to get order in a class. I'm going to bring this young lady to this position of attention, and then I'm going to give her what I know is true. And so he began to give me the messages that I needed to hear to get my attention, that I would then have to explain to my parents as to why I was even after school with my math teacher. And I had to explain to them it was because I was being disruptive and because I don't like math. And my mothers, of course, and my father were not happy with that idea. But the more time I spent with this math teacher, the more I realized how much I enjoyed math. Mm-hmm. And the more I spent time with him, the more he made numbers come alive to me. And that was the turning point of me embracing who I was, truly as a leader. Yes, I understood at that moment what that meant, because with the education of math also came life lessons, right? He had a son who was also in the same grade. We've known each other for several years up to that point. And his son, I'll never forget his name. His name was Russ. Russell and I would, kid around with each other all the time. And of course, he probably knew of me through his son. So when I got to his class, he probably had his own, background, and he probably was ready for me, right? But he used it as an opportunity. And to be honest with you, Neil, that was the turning point for me, because from that moment on, I never forgot that I was a leader. I never forgot my influence. I never forgot the power of my words. I never forgot the need to stand in my power academically. I took advantage of opportunities to make sure that I was a unifier and not a divider. And that continued all the way through until I finished high school and decided to go into the workforce.
Mhm. All right. So that's that's powerful because what you've done is a little bit different than many of my guests so far. Is you've chosen one inflection point as the point in time that put you on the path. And there were a few things you said that I really love. You know, you were popular for the wrong in the wrong way because you were a disruptor. Leaders disrupt things.
Mhm.
So I just needed to name that. And you have created a disruption in coaching.
Yes, I have.
You created a disruption in coaching. And you learned who you were. You said who I was as a leader. You had influence. This is remarkable. You were pretty young. I have influence. You know, did you? I mean, I don't know if you had that word in your head when you were that young, but you realized it was something in you that said, I have influence, period. Um, and math was, it could have been anything. But this teacher knew that if you applied yourself, your influence would be different.
Right. And he did
Right?
it through math because
And
math is problem solving skills.
yeah.
In order for you to get the right answer, you have to, one, be patient with the process. The process repeats itself. If
Mhm,
you don't study the laws and the rules, you'll always miss the outcome on the math problem. It'll always be wrong. And so
mhm,
it was repetition, it was neatness, being orderly.
mhm,
It was trying things out and testing and being okay with getting it wrong and doing it again to get it right, right? So repetition is everything in math, because
mhm,
you have to memorize the way. You have to memorize the way of the problems and the rules. And so once math taught me that lesson, I was not afraid to test and retest anything, right?
mhm,
I was not afraid to, and of course that continued on into my academics because I became a chemist and a mathematician at my undergrad work at Howard. So Howard University took it to the next level, but that was the problem solving base that I had, and I allowed the education of math and the application of mathematics to strengthen my problem solving skills.
mhm. I was going to ask you where else does this problem solving and order and process show up in your life? And I'm guessing the answer is everywhere.
Everywhere. Neil, it's everywhere. And
Yeah.
that's the gift of knowing that people who embrace the idea of being problem solvers.
Mhm,
It's like I see something that I don't like, I can judge it and dismiss it, or I can figure out what am I called to do something about it.
mhm,
Right. And so everything I've been exposed to, I've always said there's a reason or a season. And so the reason was the first thing. I was like, okay, there's a reason for it. So let me lean in and see what happens. And so I'm going to test and retest. So I'm going to show up and I'm going to show up in different ways and see what works. Right.
mhm,
Um, if it's for a season, then I'll play full out until it's over. So that is the base. And so everything I've ever done connects to the other. I've never had some wild card on, that just so extreme. People are like, what are you doing? And that never happened with me. Some
mhm,
people have a lot of randomness in their lives and things just, they're adventurous and they're creatives and there's just no real lines that connect things. Me, I'm a very orderly and I'm very process driven. So every step connect to the other. So from 7th grade all the way through my doctorate, it all
mhm,
has to make sense to me. So
mhm,
the relationships I have, the students that I attract, it all has to make sense to me. And so that's my brain is wired for that in that way. And so I don't know if that's a bad thing now that I think about it, Neil.
you know your strengths. You know your come from place. You know you where you begin as a
Right.
leader. And if we start from that place, we can show up um, in a wide range of contexts if you come from your strength. So that's what I'm getting from you. Another thing that I'm getting that I need to I just need to call it forward because it feels like a way that comes through your math and your order. You said that you are a unifier. Um, and that it just feels so intentional. you also spoke about your words, and the impact of your words. So I want you to just talk about that a little bit, being a unifier and the impact of your words, and maybe even connect that to process and structure and just the intentionality.
Right. So being a unifier means that it's almost like in math, there are variables. In math, there's variables in an equation, and you solve for a variable. People are variables, right? So I'm thinking that each person plays a role, each person has a part. The idea is to find out, how do I make that variable work? How do I make them a part of the equation? What makes sense for them to where their significance is completely illuminated, right? So to look at individuals as being a leader who believes in unifying folk is to bring out the best gifts and talents that they have to serve the greater good. So if that means that I have a number of different people in my community, it is my ability to connect them and then create community for the purpose of whatever the agenda is, right? So bringing people together for a cause, being able to problem solve and create and this combination of brilliance so that we can achieve something amazing. So that's the unifier part of me. And, I don't ever think that I can do it alone, right? And so that's the other part of it. So you can't do it all alone. You need community. You need, and whenever it's appropriate for you to lead alone, you do. But most frequently, you don't do it alone. And so it's important that you learn the skill of being able to identify people's gifts and talents right away so that you can use them at their best. And so that's not only what we teach in coaching, but it is the way of leadership in the organization when you think about teams and engagement and employee engagement and being able to lead individuals and knowing their gifts and talents and how they are able to support and serve the vision.
No, I love that. To completely illuminate their strengths, to completely illuminate their gifts and talents, to bring people together in teams or organizations and illuminate everyone to achieve some goal, some cause. I love that. And community is what we're here to talk about a little bit today. So this is a great transition. So what we're going to spend some time on now is women's leadership and community. And that may seem really broad, but you're the perfect person to talk about this because this clearly has been a part of your evolution and a part of your way. So first of all, what does, and this is the month of women. I'm going to call it that. I'm going to change it up a little. It's a month of women, and you're a woman and you're a leader. So first of all, let's start with, what does women's leadership and community mean to you?
All right. So women's leadership and community means family. So not to add another word to it, but that's what it means to me. It means being a catalyst to be able to create, because, women are nurturers. Some of us women are, being mothers, women are creatives. There's so many layers to being a woman, but the most important to me is that we are birthers. We are able to give life. We are able to birth. We are able to conceive. And I think that being a woman in leadership means to be able to look at opportunities, to nurture, to develop, to support, to create a true nucleus or a family. It's a mindset thing, but I think that when I hear the word leadership and I'm thinking about, being here in March, I think about being a creator, being someone who can birth greatness. That's what I believe. That's what I believe.
So I love that. So many powerful words in there: family, catalyst, creator, nurturer, birther. So what, and you're an African American woman, and you're a woman, and you're a leader. So for this month, at those intersections, what what's important about this? I want to go into the workplace. I think I might go to some other places as well, but I want to go into the workplace first. What's important about women's role inside business, inside corporate America?
Right. So because I am the child of a woman who was in the women's movement, the word role is not, it's a little weird for me.
Mhm.
Right. So the role of a woman is very weird. So
What have I said? What have I said? Roles. Like
right,
plural.
right. Roles, yes. Yes, but I think it's just the word roles, Neil. I think that's the problem. I mean, you got to
Okay.
remember being in 1970, my mother, who was a very loyal wife, cared for my father in a very traditional way. But when the women's movement started, it adjusted the household,
Mhm.
completely adjusted the household. An atmosphere of the home shifted when the idea of the role of the woman, what was traditionally defined, to where it is today. So let's advance the word for me and say, yes, the role of the woman, or the role of my community, is to be whatever the hell we want to be. I think it's for us to define it for ourselves, right? To break traditions and stereotypes. So I believe that the role is to disrupt. If I go back to that 7th grade girl again, because that's who I am. So if the role, if it means my role is to disrupt the traditional mindset so that we can have transformation in the workplace, that's who I am. So that's my role. And if I can partner up with other women who understand that we are disruptors in a very positive way, then that's what our role is. That's what I see.
Yeah, I think that that disruption is necessary to give birth to something new and to something better. As you were talking, um, I love how you dismantle role. Because I was even thinking, well, why do I have to be in a role? I'm a man. Why do I have to be in a role? And the word that came to mind for me was, you know, what is your way? What are the ways of women? What, sort of path. It opens up the space a little bit more, whether it's disruptive or not. It just feels a little bit more liberating and free when
I
I think of
appreciate
the
that.
way. Yeah.
I appreciate that, Neil, because this is the first time when in sitting here with you, listening, to this interview, as I'm talking and listening at myself at the same time. I think that I must be in a different place in my life to where, and of course, age has a lot to do with it, but experience does too, right? So I think that you're right, that if we all have roles, we have job descriptions, we have all that stuff, right? But I wasn't thinking of it in that traditional way. I'm thinking about, more of a deeper meaning for me based on the interview questions you're going through right now. And so that's what stood out for me. And so I appreciate you even asking that question in that way, because it allows me to capture it so that I can use it in my class. Because I think it's amazing. I think it's an amazing way to unpack certain things that are no longer serving us. And I think the idea of a role in the workplace is no longer serving certain women like myself, or certain individuals, forget gender, certain individuals and who have decided that the idea of a role is too restrictive, right? So that's what came up for me, and I love it. Actually, I'm glad we actually had the conversation.
Yeah. No, I have a relationship with roles that is based on some of my coach training that has helped me. Because you're right, it's when we think about roles in the traditional sense, whether it's in the home, in society, or in the workplace, there's this entanglement that gets all wrapped up, and people get all wrapped up in these roles, and they become identity.
Right.
And the way I look at roles, from my coach training and what I do with teams and even with individuals, is that The role isn't the person. And there are external roles and there are internal roles, and what we just talked about, and then there's a way. So external roles might be, you know, the title, the job title, you're president, right? Somebody's a director, somebody's a manager. Those are external roles, and they're needed for businesses to operate. People need to do certain things. And so they have descriptions. Here's what this role description is. And then a human being is a human being. And then they occupy the role. And then they have a way of going about forming that role. They can leave, and another person can come in, and they'll have a way in that same role that they occupy that will look different, but the role never changes. Different person, different way. And their way is based on aspects of themselves. Am I a disruptor? Is it a unifier? Is it a connector? Is it an inquirer? Whatever aspect you choose to bring of yourself on a particular day, right?
True.
So you're still doing things your way. Mm-hmm. And you can occupy all sorts of different roles in your life. So that's how I think about roles. And I think it's a worthy conversation to help people. It allows us to talk about roles in a more healthful way if we draw distinctions between the human and the role. Mm-hmm. So that's where I will leave that. So thank you for that. Anything you want to say to that? But it's just sort of a wonderful circular conversation, but I think it's worth it for people to hear it and see and take it and do with it whatever they will.
Exactly.
So what in your experience, because you've obviously had a career, right? You're an experienced leader, you're an experienced professional. You started out, I think you said, as a chemist, or at least you're trained as a chemist. Now you own a business, and you own a training business, and you're also a service provider as a coach. How has your way shifted over time in the workplace? And what have you observed in general about the way of women in the workplace? How has it advanced? How has it expanded and evolved to be even better?
Oh, Neil, that question even set me back in another particular decade. So I recall when I started working, women had, in my particular agency, when I worked for the federal government, women had just left what we call the secretary's pool. Mm-hmm. So women had roles and women were in the secretary's pool. If you were in these agencies, most companies had the pool, P-O-O-L. Mm-hmm. And so I entered the workforce when most of them were coming out of the pool and entering in as HR types. Some of them were lucky enough. I say lucky because it was not always open as an opportunity to do something more technical, to go back to school, to go acquire a new skill, to put themselves in a unique place. So I watched that. I watched the first generation of these women coming out to be career women. Mm-hmm. Okay. In a very traditional agency in the federal government. And so what I noticed over time is that when I entered the workforce as a chemist, my shoes were too loud, and as far as the lab was concerned. I mean, literally, there are things crazy. That just doesn't make sense. So my shoes were too loud. So we all know in certain environments what's safe and not safe, right? So you're supposed to soft sole shoes, so you don't slip and fall, etc. I just didn't want to fall into that norm. I just wanted to do it my way, and so I did. But that's the disruptor in me.
Disruptor,
right?
And your way.
Right. So what I observed is that when I moved into my position as a chemist in this agency, I evolved from one level to another, progressively moved up the ladder with promotion, of course. And then I left the agency and started working as a contractor in the corporate space. Again, doing what I love to do. I can tell you that what I experienced as a young woman was that I observed the need to find other talent like me. need to find other women of color, other people of difference that were not seen and heard. In a lot of ways, be that seventh grade math teacher looking for the individuals that were checked out or benched and decided that they didn't want to participate, giving them the opportunity to reframe what they were experiencing so they can participate for promotion and visibility.
You were looking inside the workplace.
That's right.
Okay.
Inside my own workplace. And so I continue to do that. Every level that I aspired to, I would say, this is what I want to be, this is what I want to do. And I would find sponsors at the time that would, a mentor that would help me kind of pull up. And then once I got there, I turned around and found some others to take with me. And so my transition from being a technical person to being a people person was because I fell in love with knowing that I found talent that other people overlooked, and to groom them and to find them, which goes back to my original history, right? So do you see what I'm saying about this connector? But I then became that person, and I did that again and again and again, all the way to where I am right now. So what I see for women and what has happened over time is that with most groups, you establish community to be supportive. You establish community to advance, to be a place of safety, right? To be able to share confidentially how you're feeling as you continue to survive and potentially thrive. Not thriving wasn't even sometimes an option, but to survive in most cases. So I see that over time, I've witnessed some of the most beautiful transformation in the workforce when it comes to women. I've seen the most amazing transformation when it comes to people of color, period. And to have participated in one role to identifying this type of talent has been amazing, because what happens is we typically look at community in a very broad or big way versus thinking that community can just be the people that you have connection to or access to. And so for me, I've always used community and connection as my access. Who do I have access to? And stayed within that, and then until it broadened itself. So sure, it started small, but now, of course, it's bigger than it was before. But that's what I've noticed, and I think it's been quite a beautiful story of growth. But I stand on the shoulders of so many who recognize, because again, it didn't take that one seventh grade math teacher to identify my disruptions, right? So it took other people, my mentors, professional mentors, my professors at universities, to polish those edges, right? To get me to understand my purpose. And then I did the same thing for the people that I identified, and I never stopped.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I say round off the corners. I love polish as well. So what I think I heard in some ways, if I were to reframe and summarize your eloquent description of that journey, is that sort of you saw a community evolve in a way that, and you used it to help you find safety, to find belonging, and then to grow and to repeat that process over time. So there's this cycle of elevating others. And you also found along the way that you have a talent for doing that. It's how you ended up where you are right now, the next evolution of you. Wow. So that's a message for, this is narrative out there, and there's probably some truth to it, that women are more relational than men. So community makes sense, for women. I would say, if we follow that narrative more often than not. But I think this is a powerful message for everybody, and in particular, people in the workplace who are trying to find safety, find confidentiality, and grow, is to not do it alone, to find community, look at the people around you, and so that you could look into yourself, and grow, or you could have someone do what you had folks do for you. You know,
Mhm.
you are you are a leader, right? You're a disruptor and you are a leader. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate it this month, so that men who are listening can hear it, women of color who are listening can hear it, and men who are trying to find their way, particularly men of color in corporate America. There's something to be said about finding community and not doing it alone.
Neil, I noticed traditionally other women may have had the same experience, that most of my mentors, with the exception of two, were all men.
Mhm.
And that is, obviously you contribute that to the field of my choice, being in science or on the science and technology side, because it was predominantly male dominated. And it took some very courageous men to decide that they were going to promote and or sponsor during a time when it wasn't necessarily celebrated. So when I think back of the two women that were my sponsors and mentors, and what they chose to do for me, and then of course me doing the same thing, I then attracted, of course, more women to sponsor, and I did most of my mentoring sponsorship for women and of any community. And so I was able to broaden my scope on what support looks like and what mentorship looks like. So just to honor those individuals, those men who chose to do that during a time when it wasn't celebrated.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. That's amazing. And for me, it's probably just the opposite. Most of my mentors have been women, starting with the women in my family, grandmother, mother, aunties, and cousins that whip you into shape, consider your age. They're your contemporaries, so they beat you up. They beat you up a little bit. In the younger days, even the girls in high school and elementary school, they keep us in. They kept me in order anyway, and just professionally. Most of my mentors have been women. Most of my coaching mentors have been women. So as I reflect on how I got here, and I'm not even kidding, it's well over 50%, probably 75, 80%. Um, so mentoring, community, supporting each other is something that I think we can all learn from. I'm going to say the divine feminine, but also when I think about diversity and inclusion, there's beauty and power in mentoring across gender or across any dimension of diversity. I think it makes us better. It makes us more powerful. And when I say powerful, I mean coming from that place of our strength, our center, like you learned to do. So thank you for sharing that. And it's amazing. This is just a conversation, and I think it was perfect that this came up for today, for this month, and with you, for who you are in the world. Are there any tips, any words of wisdom that you want to leave with our listeners today? Maybe for women, but I think given who you are, for anybody that's listened to this conversation, what do you want to leave today?
I think that what is coming up for me, as I appreciate this interview more and more as we prepare to close, is that for those who are listening, we're in a new season where it is important for us to recall that if you are on the front lines of change, if you are advocating for any type of change, if you're leading change in your organizations, if you are leading change in your communities, or maybe even leading change in your family, that the most important gift you can give yourself is to support yourself while you're in the midst of this fight or the struggle, because burnout is something that's super important, right? To not ignore. We're not superheroes. There are going to be the days where we win and there will be days when we lose. Going back to that math equation, the idea to test and retest, to push the boundaries, to be willing to fail, but to get up and do it again. The way you are able to survive and thrive in that is to be gentle with yourselves. That change does not happen overnight always. To be willing to stay in the fight or to stay in the process as you continue to figure out the multipliers, right? So that you are not quitting 5 minutes before the miracle. And so that's the one thing I would love to say, because I've been in this for a long time and I have had wonderful experiences and I've had lots of challenges that I've all embraced, right? But the gift to give myself is to say, it is okay that it didn't work out this time. This time.
Yeah. Spoken like a true scientist and mathematician. All variables matter. If it doesn't work this time, try it again. Thank you, Towanna. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Leadership Range. If you enjoyed the episode, I invite you to peruse the others for more great conversations. If you know someone you think ought to be on the podcast, please send me an email at neil@neiledwardscoaching.com. To connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/nedwards07. I look forward to you joining in for more conversations each Monday on The Leadership Range.